I am Joshua, 35, and my own mother messaged my 10-year-old kid that she shouldn't come for Christmas because it would ruin the family's mood. Thank you for being here. Please grab a warm glass of water, sit down, and listen as I tell you the whole story. My daughter, Lily, was sitting at the kitchen island, humming a Christmas carol. Her hands were covered in glue and gold glitter. She had spent the entire Saturday afternoon working on a small wooden jewelry box. She painted it white, carefully glued little gold stars around the edges, and used a red marker to write "Merry Christmas, Grandma" on the inside of the lid. It wasn't a masterpiece you would buy in a store, but it was perfect. She was so incredibly proud of it. She kept blowing on the paint to dry it faster, telling me how much Grandma was going to love it. I was at the stove, heating up some leftover pasta for dinner, smiling at her enthusiasm. Then her iPad buzzed on the counter. Lily had her own tablet for school and playing games, and she only used the messaging app to talk to my parents or her aunt. She wiped the glitter off her hands onto her jeans and tapped the screen. I heard her hum stop. I turned around to ask if she wanted cheese on her pasta. She was just staring at the screen. The color completely drained from her face. Her lower lip trembled, and she slowly looked down at the little wooden box she had spent hours perfecting. She didn't cry. She just looked incredibly small, like someone had let all the air out of her. "Lily? What is it, sweetie?" I asked, putting the wooden spoon down and walking over to her. She didn't say a word. She just pushed the iPad across the granite counter toward me. I looked at the screen. The message was from my mother. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a typo. It was a long, deliberate paragraph. It read, "Lily, you shouldn't come for Christmas tomorrow. It's best if you stay away. It will be easier for everyone. Your Uncle Matthew's kids are very sensitive this year and they have high expectations. It would just ruin the mood if someone else showed up. You have to understand where they are coming from. They are used to things a certain way, and this year has been hard for them. Tell your dad not to drive over." I read it twice. My brain struggled to process the sheer cruelty of the words. She sent this directly to a 10-year-old girl. A girl who had lost her mother and still tried to find the joy in the holidays. My mother didn't text me to discuss this as an adult. She bypassed me entirely and shot an arrow straight into my daughter's heart. I looked at Lily. She was waiting for me to say it was a joke. I wanted to tell her it was a misunderstanding, but I couldn't lie to her. My jaw tightened so hard my teeth ached. A cold, heavy stone dropped in my stomach. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the iPad across the room. I felt a chilling calmness wash over me. I picked up my own phone, opened the text thread with my mother, and typed exactly 2 words. "Got it." I hit send. I walked over, picked up Lily, and held her tight against my chest. 5 hours later, everything my family took for granted started to collapse. But to understand how we got to this point, you need to know what they put us through first. My wife passed away 5 years ago. At her funeral, while I was holding a 5-year-old Lily and trying to keep my legs from giving out, my mother pulled me aside. I thought she was going to offer comfort. Instead, she adjusted my tie, looked around at the guests, and whispered that I needed to stop crying because I was making people uncomfortable. That was the day I realized my mother cared more about the aesthetics of our family than the actual people in it. Since that day, I was the designated broken piece of the family puzzle. My younger brother, Matthew, was the golden child. He had the perfect corporate job, a wife who matched his exact level of superficiality, and 3 kids who were treated like royalty. Every family gathering was a stage for Matthew to brag about his recent promotion or his massive new salary. I never minded his success. What I minded was how my parents weaponized it against me. They looked at me and Lily as a charity case, an unfortunate obligation they had to tolerate. They never missed a chance to remind me that Matthew was contributing to a massive college fund for his kids, while I was just trying to keep my head above water paying a mortgage on a single income. They even had the nerve to suggest once that my marriage would have ended in divorce anyway if my wife hadn't gotten sick, just because we argued about money early on. It was a sick, twisted environment, but I kept bringing Lily around. I wanted her to know her grandparents. I wanted her to have a family. The cracks really started showing last Thanksgiving. We were sitting around the massive oak dining table at my parents' house. Matthew's oldest son, who was a year older than Lily, was opening a new video game console his grandparents had bought him just for the holiday. Lily had received a pair of socks. She didn't complain. She was sitting quietly on the rug, playing with the dog. Matthew's kid looked over at her, smirked, and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Only real grandkids get the big presents." The room went completely silent. I looked at my brother, expecting him to correct his son. Matthew just chuckled and took a sip of his beer. My mother smiled nervously and said, "Oh, he doesn't mean it like that, Joshua. He's just excited. Boys will be boys." I grabbed our coats and left right after dinner. I should have cut them off right then and there, but I was foolish. I thought time would fix things. I thought if I just kept being a good son, an accommodating brother, they would eventually see us as equals. I swallowed my pride over and over again. I let them make passive-aggressive comments about my clothes, my house, and my parenting. I absorbed it all so Lily wouldn't have to. But I realize now that keeping the peace only taught them that they could walk all over me without consequences. They mistook my silence for weakness. They thought they had total control over my life, my self-esteem, and my daughter's place in the family. They viewed us as accessories they could put in the closet when we didn't match the picture-perfect image they wanted to present to their wealthy country club friends. They forgot one very important thing. I wasn't putting up with them because I needed them. I was putting up with them out of the goodness of my heart. And they were about to find out exactly what happens when that goodness runs out. About 8 months before this Christmas disaster, my dad's old pickup truck finally died. He was complaining endlessly about how he couldn't get to the golf course and how my mother couldn't go to her bridge club without a second vehicle. They didn't want to buy a new car because they were supposedly saving for a European cruise. I had 2 cars. I had my everyday sedan and I had a Porsche Macan. I bought the Porsche a year before my wife got sick. It was our dream car, a symbol of the hard work we had put into our early careers. After she passed, I rarely drove it. It sat in the garage, a painful reminder of road trips we would never take. But it was fully paid off and the title was entirely in my name. When my dad complained about his truck, I did what a good son does. I drove the Porsche over to their house and handed him the keys. I didn't ask for a dime. I didn't set a time limit. I just told him to pay for his own gas and keep up with the oil changes. I thought I was doing a noble thing. They took the car with barely a thank you. Within a week, the narrative shifted. My mother started telling the neighbors they had bought a luxury SUV for their retirement. I would see them driving around town, windows down, waving at people. They parked it right in the middle of their wide, circular driveway so everyone in their upscale subdivision could see it. I let them have their illusion. I paid the registration. I paid the insurance. It cost me money every month to let them drive my luxury vehicle, but I never brought it up. I figured it was a small price to pay to keep the peace. One afternoon, I stopped by their house to drop off some mail that had been sent to my address by mistake. I walked up the driveway and heard Matthew's voice coming from the open garage. He was standing next to the Porsche, talking to my dad. "You guys should just get him to sign the title over," Matthew was saying. "He doesn't need a car like this. It's ridiculous for a single dad to hold onto a luxury vehicle. He should sell it and put the money in Lily's college fund if he actually cared about her future. Or just give it to you guys permanently. He owes you for all the babysitting you did years ago." I stopped dead in my tracks. My dad chuckled and patted the hood of the car. "We'll work on it. He's soft. A few more months and he'll probably just hand over the paperwork to get us off his back." I turned around and walked back to my car without giving them the mail. They didn't view my generosity as a gift. They viewed it as a right. They honestly believed I owed them my property simply because I was the less successful son in their eyes. The car wasn't a favor to them. It was an entitlement. That memory played on a loop in my head as I stood in my kitchen on December 23rd, staring at the cruel text message my mother had sent to my 10-year-old daughter. They thought I was soft. They thought I was a pushover. They were driving my car, using my money, and treating my child like garbage. The time for being soft was officially over. It was 8:15 p.m. The house was quiet. Lily was sitting on the couch in her pajamas, watching a cartoon, pretending she wasn't hurt. But I could see the way she kept picking at the hem of her blanket. I picked up my phone and called Stacy. Stacy has been my best friend since college. She was the one who helped me organize the funeral. She was the one who brought over casseroles when I forgot how to cook. I didn't even say hello when she picked up. "Can you drive me somewhere right now?" I asked. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, she replied. No questions asked. That's the kind of friend she is. I grabbed my coat and pulled open the top drawer in the kitchen. I moved a stack of old takeout menus and grabbed the spare key fob for the Porsche. The heavy metal felt cold in my hand. I walked into the living room and kissed the top of Lily's head. "I have to run an errand, sweetie. Stacy is going to drive me. Lock the door. I'll be back in less than an hour." Stacy pulled into my driveway with her headlights off. I got into the passenger seat. "My parents' house," I said. She put the car in reverse. "They finally crossed the line?" They told Lily she wasn't welcome for Christmas because she'd ruin Matthew's kid's mood. Stacy gripped the steering wheel tight. "Do you want me to bring a baseball bat? Or are we just using our words?" "Neither. We're taking back what's mine." We drove across town in silence. The closer we got to their neighborhood, the more ridiculous the Christmas decorations became. My parents' street looked like a theme park. Tacky plastic reindeer, synchronized flashing lights, giant inflatable snowmen. My mother loved putting on a show for the neighborhood, proving how festive and perfect her life was. We pulled up to their house. The lights were blazing. I could see the glow of the massive television through the front living room window. I could see the silhouettes of my dad and Matthew sitting on the couch. And right there, parked perfectly under the motion sensor security light, was my black Porsche Macan, freshly washed, gleaming in the cold night air. "Keep the engine running," I told Stacy. I got out of the car. I didn't sneak. I didn't hide. I walked straight up the middle of the driveway, my boots crunching loudly on the frosted concrete. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the key fob, and hit the unlock button. The Porsche's headlights flashed, and the distinct beep echoed through the quiet neighborhood. I opened the driver's side door and slid into the leather seat. It smelled like my dad's cheap cologne. I hit the ignition button. The engine roared to life with a low, aggressive growl. Through the windshield, I saw the front blinds of the house snap open. My mother's face appeared in the window, her eyes wide with shock. A second later, the front door swung open. My dad stepped out onto the porch in his socks, followed closely by Matthew. They stood there, completely frozen. They didn't yell. They didn't run toward the car. They just stared at me in absolute disbelief. They couldn't compute what was happening. The soft, compliant son was doing something unpredictable. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't look back at them. I put the car in reverse, backed smoothly out of the driveway, shifted into drive, and hit the gas. I left them standing on the cold porch, watching their stolen luxury drive away into the darkness. The morning of Christmas Eve felt surreal. There was no festive music playing, no smell of cinnamon rolls in the oven. I woke up early and walked into the kitchen. Lily was already awake. She was sitting at the breakfast nook, staring out the window at the frost on the lawn. Her usual morning chatter was completely gone. I started making coffee. While the machine was brewing, I watched her stand up, walk over to the counter, and pick up the little wooden box she had made. She didn't look at it with pride anymore. She looked at it like it was a piece of trash. She walked over to the garbage can, and with a quick, decisive motion, she snapped the lid entirely off the hinges. The sound of splintering would echoed in the quiet kitchen. She tossed both pieces into the trash and walked back to the table without a word. My chest tightened. I didn't fish it out of the trash. Leaving it there felt like the most honest thing to do. My phone started buzzing on the counter. I picked it up. It was a barrage of text messages from my parents and Matthew. Not a single message mentioned Lily. Not a single apology for the cruel text the night before. My mother, "Where is the Porsche? Did you take it?" You didn't even knock. Your father needs to go to the grocery store this morning. My dad. Are you seriously throwing a tantrum? Bring the car back right now. You are acting like a child. Matthew, you're making a huge mistake, Josh. That car was keeping Mom and Dad afloat. You're ruining Christmas over a misunderstanding. Stop being so bitter about your own life. I stared at the screen. They truly believed I was the villain. They discarded my child like wrapping paper, but they were outraged that they lost their free ride. The audacity was breathtaking. I put my phone on silent, flipped it face down, and looked at Lily. Go get dressed, I told her, forcing a smile. We're going out for pancakes. The giant ones. We drove to a diner on the other side of town. I let her order the triple stack with extra whipped cream and chocolate chips. She ate quietly, her eyes focused on her plate. On the way home, I took a detour and pulled into the parking lot of a massive craft supply store. Come on, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. You can pick out anything you want. No budget. She walked down the aisles with her hands stuffed in her pockets. She barely touched anything at first. Finally, in the back aisle, she stopped in front of a giant 1,000-piece puzzle of a galaxy and a new set of expensive watercolors. She looked up at me silently, asking for permission. I nodded, grabbed the items, and bought them. She didn't bring up Christmas. She didn't bring up Grandma. We were navigating a new reality. When we got home, the tone of the unread messages on my phone had shifted from annoyed to frantic. My dad was demanding I call him. Matthew was threatening to come over. I ignored all of it. I helped Lily clear off the dining table, and we started sorting the puzzle pieces by color. We were looking for the edge pieces when I heard the sound of tires pulling onto my gravel driveway. But it wasn't my parents' car. I looked through the peephole. A black and white cruiser was parked outside. 2 police officers were walking up my front steps. My parents had actually done it. They called the cops on me. The knock was sharp, loud, and official. It wasn't a friendly neighbor tap. It was a demand for entry. Lily jumped in her chair, a puzzle piece dropping from her hand. I put my hand on her shoulder, told her to stay put, and walked to the front door. Pulled it open. 2 uniformed officers were standing on my welcome mat. The older one, a man with graying hair and a name tag that read Davis, looked me up and down. Are you Joshua Moore? Officer Davis asked, his tone strictly professional. I am, I replied, leaning against the doorframe, projecting a calm I didn't entirely feel. Mr. Moore, we received a report of a vehicle theft from a residence across town. A black Porsche Macan. The homeowners stated that you unlawfully removed the vehicle from their property late last night. Is the vehicle currently in your garage? For a split second, I actually wanted to laugh. I couldn't believe the absolute delusion of my parents. They thought they could weaponize the police department to force me to give back a car that I owned. I didn't panic. I didn't get defensive. The vehicle is in my garage, officer, I said smoothly. Because it belongs to me. Give me exactly 30 seconds. I turned, walked to the hallway console table, and pulled open the bottom drawer. I grabbed the thick manila folder labeled Auto and walked back to the door. I pulled out the original title, the current registration, and the insurance cards. All of them had my name printed clearly at the top. Joshua Moore. No co-signers. No liens. I handed the stack of papers to Officer Davis. He took out a small flashlight and examined the documents. His partner leaned over his shoulder. I watched the professional suspicion on their faces slowly morph into profound annoyance. Officer Davis sighed heavily and handed the papers back to me. The title and registration are clear, Mr. Moore. It's your vehicle. I let my parents borrow it for a few months because my father's truck broke down, I explained calmly. Last night, my mother sent a highly inappropriate text message to my 10-year-old daughter, telling her she wasn't welcome at Christmas. So I took my car back. I used my own spare key. I didn't damage any property. The younger officer shook his head, looking disgusted. So this is a family dispute over a borrowed car, and they reported it stolen. That appears to be the case, I said. Officer Davis adjusted his duty belt. The look in his eyes told me exactly how he felt about wasting taxpayer money on petty family drama. I apologize for the disturbance, Mr. Moore. You are perfectly within your rights. We will be closing this case. He turned to leave, but then he paused, looking back at me. Actually, he said, his voice dropping slightly, we'll be paying a visit to the residence that made the call. Filing a false police report is a crime. We're going to have a very stern conversation with your parents about misusing emergency resources. I appreciate that, officer. Have a safe shift. I closed the door and locked the deadbolt. I stood in the hallway for a moment, the manila folder pressed against my chest. I wasn't shaken. I wasn't sad. I felt something colder, something much sharper. They didn't just try to cut off my daughter. They tried to turn me into a criminal to get their way. The bridge wasn't burning. I was pouring gasoline on it, and I was holding the match. By Christmas morning, the fallout from the police visit was already spreading through my parents' carefully curated social circle. Small towns love drama, but they love verified facts even more. Stacy called me around 10 a.m., laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Apparently, before the police arrived at my house, my mother had already been laying the groundwork for a grand tragedy. She had called her neighbors, crying hysterically, claiming a gang of thieves had come in the middle of the night and stolen their luxury SUV right out of the driveway. She spun a full-on cinematic robbery story, claiming the neighborhood was unsafe. But the story completely fell apart when Officer Davis and his partner showed up at her front door. The neighbors, who were outside shoveling snow, watched as the police didn't take a report, but instead stood on the porch and aggressively lectured my parents. Then someone, I still don't know who, maybe a neighbor with a scanner or someone at the precinct, leaked the truth. By noon, half the congregation at their church knew that Joshua hadn't stolen anything. He had just taken his own car back, and his parents had tried to have him arrested for it. Things unraveled fast after that. Trying to recover her dignity, my mother actually drove her friend's car to the local Porsche dealership where I bought the Mekong. She walked into the manager's office, demanding to know if she had any squatter's rights or legal recourse to claim the car since she had been the primary driver for 8 months and had put premium gas in it. The sales manager, a guy named Rick who I play golf with occasionally, apparently just blinked at her. He told her in no uncertain terms that unless her name was on the title, she had absolutely nothing to talk about, and politely asked her to leave his office. She left humiliated. But instead of feeling shame, my family doubled down. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the extended family group chat, a thread with over 30 cousins, aunts, and uncles that I usually kept on mute. Matthew had posted a picture of my dad standing by the curb holding a thermos, looking miserable in a heavy coat. The caption read, "Guess who's hoofing it to work in the freezing cold next week thanks to someone's selfish tantrum. So much for the spirit of giving." I watched the chat. A few cousins replied with laugh reactions, thinking it was a joke. An aunt replied with a hesitant yikes. Nobody asked what really happened. Nobody wanted the truth. They wanted the comfortable narrative where I was the unstable, bitter widower who ruined Christmas. I didn't defend myself. I didn't type a single word explaining the text message sent to Lily or the fake police report. I simply pressed the Leave Group button. No announcement, no dramatic exit. Just gone. Let them have their echo chamber. I didn't care about their opinions anymore. I was busy making hot chocolate for my daughter and helping her finish the border of her galaxy puzzle. For the first time in 5 years, my house felt genuinely peaceful. The heavy, suffocating expectation of trying to please people who hated me was gone. But my mother couldn't stand being ignored. Silence was the one weapon she didn't know how to fight. If she couldn't control me privately, she was going to try and destroy me publicly. And that's when she made her biggest mistake. On the evening of December 26th, the digital knife plunged into my back. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when Stacy texted me a series of screenshots. Her message just read, "Don't do anything crazy yet, but you need to see this." I dried my hands and opened the images. It was a long, meticulously crafted Facebook post from my mother. She didn't make it completely public. She was too smart for that. She set the privacy to friends and extended family, ensuring it reached exactly the audience she wanted to manipulate. Distant relatives, old classmates, and people from my hometown who only knew the surface details of my life. The post started with fake sweetness, a tactic she had perfected over decades. "Family doesn't always mean blood," she wrote. "Sometimes people choose bitterness over love, no matter how hard you try to hold them close." Then it hit the gas. When Joshua's wife passed away, we opened our hearts and our home to him. We tried everything to help him pick up the pieces. We supported him financially and emotionally. But some people just want to stay broken. They project their anger onto the people who love them most. It breaks a mother's heart to watch her son spiral into such dark, selfish behavior, especially during the holidays. I felt my blood pressure rising, but I kept reading. The next paragraph was the kill shot. "He is pushing everyone away. Honestly, with his temper and his instability, he'll never find another woman who will put up with him. He'll never rebuild a normal life. But at least our other son, Matthew, gave us a beautiful daughter-in-law and 3 perfect grandkids. They bring us the kind of joy we always hoped for. We are focusing on the light this season and praying for those lost in the dark." I stared at the glowing screen. The sheer, unadulterated venom took my breath away. It wasn't just a lie about the car or the police. She was publicly declaring that I was damaged goods, a terrible father, and unlovable. She was using my dead wife to score sympathy points on the internet. And she was publicly elevating Matthew's kids while completely erasing Lily's existence. I scrolled through the screenshots of the comments. People who hadn't spoken to me in a decade were chiming in, sending prayers. "So sorry you have to deal with this. Stay strong. A mother's love never fails. Matthew really is a blessing to your family." They were eating it up. She had successfully painted herself as the tragic, long-suffering matriarch dealing with a psychotic son. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel misunderstood. I felt a white-hot, consuming rage. I realized in that moment that my mother didn't think she had lost a son. She thought she had successfully disposed of the defective one. She thought she had won. I walked into the living room. Lily was asleep on the couch, the TV playing softly in the background. I pulled a blanket over her and tucked it under her chin. I looked at her peaceful face and made a promise to her right then and there. I was never going to let these people near her again. But before I built the wall, I was going to scorch the earth. I picked up my phone and called Stacy. "Did you read it?" she asked, her voice tight with anger. "I read it," I said. "Come pick me up. We have one more stop to make." Stacy pulled up to my house 10 minutes later. I didn't say a word when I got in. I just stared straight ahead. She didn't ask questions. She knew exactly where we were going. When we arrived at my parents' house, the ridiculous plastic snowman on the lawn was still inflating and deflating, waving its stupid mechanical arm. Matthew's expensive SUV was parked in the driveway, probably full of the big presents his real grandkids had received. "Wait here," I told Stacy. I walked up the front steps. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the doorbell. I grabbed the brass handle, turned it, and pushed the door open. They were all in the living room. The fireplace was on. A half-empty bottle of expensive wine sat on the coffee table. My mother was sitting in her recliner, scrolling on her tablet, probably reading the sympathetic comments on her post. My dad was in his armchair. Matthew and his wife were on the sofa. My mother's head snapped up first. The smug satisfaction wiped off her face instantly, replaced by genuine shock. My dad stood up halfway, then froze. Matthew's wife crossed her arms tightly over her chest and shrank back into the cushions. No one said a word. The silence was thick and heavy. I walked slowly into the foyer. I didn't look at Matthew. I didn't look at my dad. I locked eyes directly with my mother. I walked over to the antique console table by the hallway mirror. Sitting right in the center was a large, vintage ceramic Santa Claus. It had been in our family for 30 years. It was her prized Christmas possession. I picked it up in my right hand. I didn't break eye contact with her. And then, with a flick of my wrist, I threw it as hard as I could against the brick fireplace. The explosion of ceramic was deafening. Pieces of painted clay shattered and scattered across the hardwood floor, raining down on the expensive Persian rug. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. Matthew jumped to his feet, his hands raised in front of him. "Hey, what the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, though his voice cracked with fear. I ignored him. I walked slowly into the kitchen, the crunch of ceramic under my boots echoing in the dead silence. I opened the glass cabinet, grabbed a decorative porcelain dining plate, and casually tossed it onto the tile floor. It shattered into 100 pieces. I turned around and walked back to the archway of the living room. They were terrified. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet, accommodating punching bag. I was the storm. "You listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice dangerously low and steady, cut through the room like a razor. "You don't text my daughter. You don't speak about my dead wife on the internet. You don't ever contact me again." My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. She was shaking. "You want a broken son? You got one. You want to play the victim? Go ahead. But understand this, you are no longer our family. If any of you come near my house, or try to contact Lily, I promise you, I will make you regret it." I didn't wait for a response. I turned my back on them, walked out the front door, and left it wide open to the freezing winter air. 2 days after I shattered the ceramic Santa and walked out of that house, a piece of mail arrived. It was in a glittery red envelope, clearly a Christmas card. It was addressed to me in Matthew's overly neat corporate handwriting. For a fraction of a second, a tiny, pathetic part of my brain thought maybe it was an apology. Maybe the shock of my reaction had finally knocked some sense into them. I took a deep breath and ripped the envelope open. It wasn't an apology. It was a calculated threat disguised as brotherly concern. Inside the card was a handwritten note. It read, "Josh, I don't agree with how Mom handled the text to Lily, but your behavior was completely psychotic. You terrified my wife and kids. You need serious psychiatric help. I'm writing this because Mom is currently talking to a lawyer. She is seriously considering pressing charges against you for destruction of property, breaking and entering, and making terroristic threats. She's also looking into grandparents' rights for custody of Lily since you are clearly an unfit parent. Fix this before it destroys your life." I read the note twice. Then, I threw my head back and laughed out loud. The sound startled my dog, who looked up at me from his bed. It wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated disbelief at their stupidity. They were trying to make me flinch. They thought the word lawyer and the threat of a custody battle would send me crawling back, begging for forgiveness. They thought they still held the power. Instead of panicking, I picked up my phone and called Carter. Carter was an old friend from college who now worked as a senior paralegal at a prominent real estate and family law firm downtown. We hadn't spoken much in the last year, but he picked up on the second ring. "Josh, man, it's been a minute. Merry Christmas, a little late," he said warmly. "Merry Christmas, Carter. I need a massive favor, and I need it completely off the record for now." "Shoot." I spent the next 10 minutes giving him the condensed version of the nightmare. The text message to Lily, taking the Porsche back, the fake police report, the Facebook smear campaign, and finally my dramatic exit involving the smashed ceramic Santa. Then I read him Matthew's letter. "Okay, first of all, grandparents' rights in this state are incredibly difficult to obtain, especially against a fit, surviving parent. That's an empty threat to scare you," Carter said, his professional tone taking over. "As for the destruction of property, it's a broken plate and a cheap Santa. The cops won't care. But the breaking and entering part is what she'll try to spin to a judge to get a restraining order against you." "I walked through an unlocked door," I pointed out. "Doesn't matter. It's not your house," Carter said, typing on his keyboard. "Hold on, let me just look up the public property records to see exactly how the deed is structured. Sometimes these things are messier than people think." I heard the rapid clicking of his mouse. Then the typing stopped. A long silence stretched over the phone line. "Carter? You still there?" "Josh," Carter said, his voice suddenly sounding very strange, very tight. "Are you sitting down?" "I'm standing in my kitchen." "Why? You didn't break into someone else's house?" Carter said slowly, a grin evident in his voice. "Because according to the county clerk's office, your name is still on the deed." "Wait, what are you talking about?" I asked, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. "My name is on what deed?" "The deed to your parents' house. The 4-bedroom colonial in the gated subdivision," Carter said, reading off his screen. "The title lists 3 owners. Your father, your mother, and Joshua Moore. Joint tenancy with rights of survivorship." My mind raced backwards, frantically searching through years of memories. And then, it hit me like a freight train. 12 years ago, right after I graduated college and landed a solid engineering job, my parents were drowning in credit card debt. They needed to refinance their mortgage to pull out cash and consolidate their loans, but their credit scores were tanked. They begged me to co-sign the refinance. To do that, the bank required my name to be temporarily added to the property title. They promised it was just a formality. They promised they would refinance again in a year and take my name off. I was young, naive, and wanted to help my family, so I signed the paperwork. Over the next decade, life happened. I got married, my wife got sick, she passed away, I focused on Lily. The house deed completely vanished from my mind. And clearly, it had vanished from my parents' minds too. They never took my name off. "Carter," I whispered, the reality of the situation washing over me. "Are you telling me I legally own that house?" "You legally own a 1/3 equity share of that property," Carter confirmed. "Which means you had every legal right to walk through that front door. You cannot trespass on your own property. Furthermore, you had a legal right to smash that ceramic Santa because technically you own 1/3 of that too." I started to pace the kitchen floor. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted. It had completely flipped upside down. They were threatening me with lawyers and police, unaware that they were standing on a trapdoor, and I held the lever. "What can I do with this?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "Oh, buddy, you hold the golden key," Carter chuckled. "If you want to play hardball, you can hire a real estate attorney and force a partition sale. You can legally compel them to either buy out your 1/3 of the current market value of the house, which, looking at the recent comps in that neighborhood, is a massive chunk of cash. Or, if they can't afford to buy you out, the court will force them to put the house on the market, sell it, and give you your cut." They thought I was the weak link. They thought they could discard me and Lily and go back to their perfect, wealthy aesthetic. They had used me to save their house 12 years ago, just like they used me for my Porsche. "Carter, do you know a good real estate lawyer?" "A vicious one?" I asked. "I know the best one in the city. A guy named Mr. Gray. He eats cases like this for breakfast. I'll text you his contact info right now." I hung up the phone and looked out the kitchen window. The winter sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows across the snow. I thought about the text message my mother sent to Lily. I thought about the Facebook post. I thought about Matthew's pathetic threat. They wanted a legal war. They were about to get a nuclear strike. The very next morning, the winter air was brutally cold as I drove downtown to meet Mr. Gray. Carter wasn't exaggerating when he said this guy ate cases like mine for breakfast. His office was located on the 20th floor of a sleek glass building, outfitted with dark mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and walls lined with heavy legal volumes. Mr. Gray himself was a man in his late 50s, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. He had the sharp, calculating look of a shark who had just smelled blood in the water. I sat in a heavy leather chair across from his massive desk and handed him the property deed Carter had pulled. I also handed him the Christmas card Matthew had sent, the one threatening me with a lawyer and a custody battle over Lily. Mr. Gray pushed his silver-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose, read the handwritten card in silence, and then carefully reviewed the property deed. He didn't laugh out loud, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward in a way that told me he knew exactly how much damage we were about to inflict on my family's massive egos. "Mr. Moore, Mr. Gray said, folding his hands resting on the polished wood of his desk. Your brother and your mother are playing a very dangerous game with completely empty threats. They have absolutely no legal grounds for a custody dispute. You are a fit, surviving parent with a stable income and a safe home. A judge would throw their petition out in 5 minutes. However, concerning this house, they made a fatal, arrogant error 12 years ago. They left your name on the title of a property that has appreciated significantly in a prime real estate market. You are not a guest in that house. You are a legal co-owner. I don't want to live there, I told him flatly, leaning forward. I don't even want the money, to be completely honest. I just want them to realize they don't hold the cards anymore. I want them to feel the exact same helplessness they tried to force onto my daughter. Oh, they will realize it very quickly, Mr. Gray replied smoothly, pulling a crisp legal pad toward him. We are going to draft a formal demand letter right now. It will state clearly that you are exercising your absolute legal right to force a petition sale. We will give them exactly 2 options. Option A. They buy out your 1/3 equity share at current market value within 60 days. Option B. We file a lawsuit to force the sale of the property on the open market, and the proceeds are split 3 ways. Either way, they have to pay you a massive sum of money, or they lose the roof over their heads. I felt a massive surge of adrenaline rush through my veins. For 5 long years, they had used my finances, my car, and my grief against me. They thought I was a pushover. Now, the law was handing me a sledgehammer and I was going to swing it. We drafted the letter right then and there. It was cold, formal, and utterly merciless. It stripped away all the toxic family history and reduced them to mere tenants standing in the way of my legal rights. I signed the bottom with a firm hand, and Mr. Gray assured me it would be sent via certified mail that exact afternoon. Walking out of that office building into the crisp winter air, I felt taller. The heavy, suffocating fog that had clouded my judgment and kept me compliant for the last 5 years was completely gone. The war was officially on. The certified letter from Mr. Gray's office arrived at my parents' house on a Tuesday morning. I knew the exact moment the mail carrier handed it to them because my cell phone practically exploded on my kitchen counter. For the first 2 hours, I didn't get any phone calls. I just got a frantic, rapid-fire string of text messages. My dad texted first. Josh, what the hell is this garbage from a lawyer? Call me immediately. You are making a huge mistake. We need to talk about this like adults. An hour later, when I didn't respond to his demands, the tone completely shifted from angry authority to pure, unadulterated panic. My mother left a voicemail. I sat at my kitchen island, sipping a cup of black coffee, and listened to it on speakerphone. Her voice was shaking violently. She was entirely stripped of that polished, arrogant, country club tone she used to belittle me on Facebook. She sounded exactly like an old woman who had just realized she stepped on a landmine and heard the click. Joshua, please pick up the phone, she pleaded, her breath catching in her throat. This is a massive misunderstanding. The bank was supposed to take your name off the deed years ago. It's just a clerical error, a technicality. You can't force us out of our home. We built our lives here. Please just call us back. Let's just sit down and talk about this as a family. Then came Matthew's email, the golden child. The brother who, just days prior, had threatened to take my daughter away and declared me mentally unstable, was suddenly begging for mercy. He wrote 3 massive paragraphs of sheer desperation. He claimed that a forced property buyout would completely bankrupt our parents and destroy the inheritance he had been heavily counting on to pay for his kids' private schools. I read the email twice, scanning every single line. There was absolutely no mention of Lily. There was no mention of the cruel Christmas text message that started this entire chain of events. There was no apology for calling the cops on me. There was only raw, selfish fear about losing their wealth, their pristine reputation, and their financial comfort. They didn't care that they had broken my heart. They only cared that I was breaking their bank accounts. I didn't answer a single phone call. I didn't reply to a single text message or email. I simply put my phone on silent, placed it face down on the granite counter, and walked away. I let them sit in the terrifying, suffocating silence they had forced on me so many times over the years. Whenever I had tried to express my feelings or defend my wife's memory, they had met me with cold, dismissive silence. Now silence was my weapon. Silence is a mirror. When you refuse to engage with narcissists, they have no one to project their toxicity onto, and for the first time in their lives, they were being forced to look at their own ugly reflection. They were trapped in a house they suddenly realized they didn't fully own, waiting for a son they had discarded to decide their fate. For the next 48 hours, the panic radiating from their side of town was palpable, and I was sleeping better than I had in 5 years. At 9 a.m. the following morning, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting any packages, and I certainly wasn't expecting company. I checked the peephole, bracing myself to see a furious Matthew or my father standing there ready for a screaming match on my front lawn. Instead, I saw a woman shivering on my porch, holding a small rolling suitcase and wearing a heavy winter coat. It was Aunt Sarah, my mother's youngest sister. I hadn't seen her in person in almost 5 years, right around the time of my wife's funeral. She lived out in Arizona, enjoying her retirement, and she usually kept a very safe distance from the endless drama my mother constantly manufactured. I quickly unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. She looked up at me, her eyes tired but incredibly sharp. "I'm not staying with them," she said, her breath pluming in the freezing air. Before I could even say hello, "Can I come in, Josh?" "Of course," I said, stepping aside immediately to let her into the warm hallway. I grabbed her suitcase and closed the door behind her. She didn't even wait to take her heavy coat off before she started explaining. She told me she had flown in early that morning to surprise the family for New Year's Eve. She took a cab straight from the airport, walked through their front door, and instantly hit a wall of toxic, suffocating tension. My parents were pacing the hardwood floors, arguing frantically about mortgages, lawyers, and dipping into their retirement funds. When Sarah dropped her bags and asked where I was, the entire room went dead silent. Matthew pulled her aside into the kitchen and tried to spin the exact same lie they had been selling the whole town. He told her I was completely unstable, that I had snapped out of pure jealousy over his salary and his perfect family, and that I was trying to legally steal their parents' house out of spite. "But I know your mother," Sarah said, sitting at my kitchen island and wrapping her cold hands around the hot mug of coffee I had just poured her. "I grew up with her, Josh. She has always been a master manipulator. I saw the way they were acting. They weren't sad that you were gone. They weren't worried about your mental health. They were absolutely terrified that you had finally fought back and cornered them. So, I walked back into the hallway, grabbed my bags, called an Uber, and came straight here." Having Sarah in my house felt like a massive, heavy weight lifting off my shoulders. She brought a genuine warmth and an easy laughter that my home had been missing for the holidays. That night was New Year's Eve. There was no forced small talk. There were no passive-aggressive insults about my career, and absolutely no one making Lily feel like a second-class citizen. It was just the three of us sitting on the comfortable living room couch, eating buttered popcorn straight from the bowl, watching the countdown coverage on television, and actually enjoying each other's company. At midnight, we toasted with sparkling cider. Lily leaned her head against my shoulder, looked up at me with a huge smile, and whispered, "This is the best holiday ever." She meant it. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment one below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The next morning, the first day of the new year, we were sitting around the dining table eating the massive stack of blueberry pancakes Sarah had insisted on making. The sunlight was pouring through the windows, melting the frost on the lawn. Felt like a fresh start. But during breakfast, Sarah revealed something that completely shattered any lingering shred of guilt I might have had about destroying my relationship with my parents. We were talking quietly about the past, making sure Lily couldn't hear us from the living room. I mentioned how isolated I had felt over the last 5 years, how I always thought it was my fault that I couldn't seem to fit into their perfect mold. Sarah set her coffee cup down on the wooden table, her expression turning incredibly serious and profoundly sad. "You aren't the first one, Joshua," she said quietly, leaning closer to me. "They did this before. You just didn't know about it." "Did what?" I asked, my brow furrowing in confusion. 3 years ago, your cousin Leah's son stopped coming to the big family gatherings," Sarah explained. "Nobody really asked why. Everyone just assumed Leah was busy. But your mother told me the truth privately over the phone. She said it was better if Leah's son stayed home because he is autistic. She told me his behavior was too unpredictable, that he didn't like loud noises, and it ruined the peaceful, elegant aesthetic of her family dinners. She actually told Leah that her son made Matthew's kids uncomfortable, and asked her to stop bringing him around. I felt the blood roaring in my ears. My chest tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. They had done the exact same thing to an innocent, neurodivergent little boy just because he didn't fit into their glossy, magazine cover version of reality. They cut a child out of the family simply for being inconvenient, and nobody in the extended family stood up to them. They were repeating the exact same cycle of cruelty with Lily. "Sarah," I said, my voice dangerously calm as I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. "I need you to say everything you just told me again, and I need to record it, just for my own protection, because I know exactly how she operates, and I need proof." Sarah didn't hesitate for a single second. She looked me dead in the eye and nodded. "Hit record," she said. I pressed the red button on the screen. Sarah repeated the story, her voice clear, concise, and filled with quiet anger. She detailed exactly what my mother had said about Leah's son, the excuses she made, and the deliberate exclusion of a child. I stopped the recording and saved the audio file directly to my cloud storage. It wasn't just a piece of painful family history anymore. It was a loaded weapon. I had the ultimate leverage to protect my daughter. I thought the legal threat over the house would have kept my mother quiet and forced her to retreat. But I underestimated the ego of a narcissist. Narcissists absolutely cannot handle losing control of the public narrative. They would rather burn the world down than admit they were wrong. And my mother was about to light a match she couldn't blow out. 2 days after New Year's, my mother made another highly calculated post on Facebook. She couldn't stand the fact that her friends might be whispering about the police showing up at my house, so she tried to rewrite history again. She posted a gloomy picture of her Christmas tree with the lights completely turned off and the ornaments hanging in the shadows. The caption read, "This year was incredibly quiet, and not by choice. Sometimes family members drift into darkness, and all a mother can do is pray they find their way back to the light. We will always be grateful for the son who stood by us, and the beautiful grandkids who bring joy even when others try to ruin the season with anger and greed." Matthew, right on cue, commented underneath, "You did your best, Mom. Some people just want to be angry and tear others down." It was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. She didn't explicitly name me, but everyone in our hometown knew exactly who she meant. She was still desperately trying to control the town's perception of me, painting me as a greedy, angry son trying to steal their house. I didn't reply to the post. I didn't type a furious comment. I grabbed my heavy winter coat, grabbed my car keys, and drove straight across town to their house. I didn't walk up to the front door this time. I parked my car across the street, rolled down the window, and waited. About 20 minutes later, the automatic garage door slowly opened. My mother and Matthew were walking out, carrying reusable grocery bags toward Matthew's car. I stepped out of my car, crossed the street, and stood right at the edge of their pristine concrete driveway. They both froze instantly. Matthew dropped the bag he was holding, and a carton of orange juice rolled onto the pavement. He stepped in front of my mother, trying to puff out his chest and look intimidating. "I told you not to come back here, Josh," Matthew barked, though his voice wavered noticeably. I ignored him entirely. I looked right past him, locking eyes with my mother. I pulled out my phone, turned the media volume all the way up to maximum, and hit play on the recording. Aunt Sarah's voice echoed loudly in the cold, quiet driveway. Your daughter isn't the first person they tried to erase from the family. They did the same thing to Leah's son because he made them uncomfortable. They stopped inviting an autistic child to keep their environment calm. My mother's face drained of all color. She looked like all the blood had been siphoned out of her body. Matthew's mouth literally dropped open. He looked back at his mother, realizing for the first time that her lies were unraveling. You are not going to keep talking about me and my daughter on the internet like we are some tragic story you get to control, I said, my voice steady, hard, and absolutely uncompromising. If you post one more vague insult, if you speak my name or Lily's name to anyone in this town, I will send this audio file directly to every single person who liked your pathetic Facebook post. I will send it to your church group. I will send it to Matthew's boss. I will burn your fake reputation to the ground. Neither of them said a single word. The fake power they held over me was completely broken. I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove away without looking back. Fans 7.1 and Hung Man Get Moi 632. That same afternoon, sitting in my quiet living room, I scrolled through my phone contacts, found my cousin Leah's number, and called her. We hadn't spoken properly in almost 4 years. The family dynamics had always kept us apart, but the moment she heard my voice on the line, she knew. I didn't have to explain the trauma, the manipulation, or the fake police reports. We shared the exact same scars inflicted by the exact same people. I invited her and her son over to my house that weekend. I told her there was absolutely no pressure, no expectations. Just 2 kids doing puzzles and 2 adults drinking coffee. When they arrived on Saturday morning, I was a little nervous, but the kids hit it off almost instantly. Leah's son was a brilliant, quiet boy who loved patterns and details. Lily was gentle and patient. Both of them were a little wary of loud people, but they understood each other's rhythm perfectly. They spent the entire afternoon sitting on the thick rug in the living room, working together to sort out the edges of the 1,000-piece galaxy puzzle I had bought for Lily on Christmas Eve. Leah and I sat at the kitchen island, drinking hot tea and slowly stitching together the emotional damage left by the people who were supposed to protect us. We shared stories of the subtle insults, the blatant favoritism, and the exhausting effort it took to constantly walk on eggshells around my mother. It was incredibly validating to hear someone else say, "You aren't crazy. They really are that toxic." The next day, Leah sent me a screenshot that made me laugh out loud. She had purposely gone onto Facebook and sent a friend request to my mother. As soon as my mother accepted it, probably hoping to snoop on Leah's life, Leah immediately blocked her. It was a small, petty act of rebellion, but it felt like a massive, shared victory. For the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have to accept the family I was born into. I could build a new one, a chosen family made up of people like Stacy, Aunt Sarah, and Leah, people who valued honesty over appearances, who loved my daughter for exactly who she was, and who didn't view relationships as transactions. The heavy, suffocating silence that used to surround me wasn't on their side anymore. It was on ours, and it was peaceful. The following Monday morning, while Lily was upstairs brushing her teeth and getting her backpack ready for school, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. The winter sun was bright, and I felt a profound sense of clarity. I opened my phone contacts. I selected my mother's number, my father's number, and Matthew's number. I pressed block caller for every single one of them. I went into my email settings and created a filter that would send any message from their addresses directly into the trash bin without ever hitting my inbox. Finally, I logged onto social media and blocked every single account associated with them, including Matthew's wife. I didn't do it in a fit of rage. The burning anger that had consumed me on Christmas Eve was completely gone. I did it the exact same way you take the corroded batteries out of a dead flashlight and throw them in the garbage. There was absolutely nothing left to fix. The mechanism was broken beyond repair, and holding onto it was just weighing me down. In a matter of 60 seconds, they were simply gone from my digital life. Later that week, I finally decided to take down the artificial Christmas tree standing in the corner of the living room. It felt incredibly good to pack away the plastic branches and the ornaments. We never had a real Christmas anyway. It had just been a stressful formality we suffered through to appease my parents. After I hauled the boxes into the attic, Lily and I put on our heavy coats and went to the local park. The air was cold, crisp, and wonderfully peaceful. The playground was mostly empty. Lily swung on the swings for a while, her laughter echoing in the cold air, and then she came over and sat next to me on the wooden bench, kicking her boots in the wood chips. She leaned her head against my arm and looked up at the bare trees. "Are we going to Grandma's house next Christmas, Dad?" she asked quietly. I looked her right in the eyes, making sure she saw the absolute certainty in my face. "No, sweetie, we aren't going there ever again." She slowly nodded, a small, genuine smile appearing on her face. That was it. There were no tears, no arguments, no lingering questions. Just a profound, mutual relief. It felt like letting go of a heavy, abrasive rope I didn't even realize I had been holding onto for decades. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place about 2 weeks later. The town gossip mill had been working overtime, but the narrative had completely shifted. I got a direct message on Facebook from an account I didn't recognize at first glance. It was Mrs. Jenkins, one of my mother's oldest, wealthiest, and most loyal friends from the local country club. "Joshua," the long message read, "I have been following everything quietly over the last few weeks. I heard the gossip circulating at the club. I saw the dramatic posts your mother made. I want to sincerely apologize to you. I believed her for a very long time. I believed everything she said about you being difficult, angry, and ungrateful. But not anymore. Her calmness simply doesn't match the absolute chaos she constantly creates around her. When I heard she called the police on you over a car you own, I realized she was lying." I smiled, reading the words, and calmly closed the laptop. The truth has a very funny way of spreading once it finds a tiny crack in the foundation. My mother's perfect, pristine image was fracturing in real time, and I didn't even have to lift a finger to break it. The people she cared about most, her wealthy social circle, were starting to see behind the mask. A few days later, a piece of mail slipped through. It was an email from Matthew that bypassed my spam filter because he used his corporate work address. I read the subject line, "Hope." I clicked on it purely out of morbid curiosity. It was short, carefully worded, and utterly pathetic. He said he hoped I was doing okay, that he missed Lily, and that things just got a little out of hand. There was no apology. It was just a calculated attempt to plant a seed of guilt. At the very bottom, he added a final line, "Mom still cries every day." It was supposed to be the hook, the emotional bait to drag me back into the drama. But it didn't work. I felt absolutely nothing, because I knew exactly what my mother was crying for. She wasn't crying for me. She wasn't crying because she missed her granddaughter. She was crying because she had lost control of her favorite punching bag, and she was about to lose a massive amount of money. I hit delete, permanently erasing the message, and went back to making dinner for my daughter. Months passed, and the brutal winter turned into a bright, warm spring. The legal battle over the house ended exactly how Mr. Gray predicted it would. Facing the terrifying public humiliation of a forced court sale, my parents drained their retirement savings, took out a massive, high-interest loan, and bought out my 1/3 share of the house just to keep up appearances in their gated community. A very large, certified check was deposited directly into my bank account. I didn't buy a new car or go on a wild vacation. I took a large portion of that money and set up a secure, high-yield college fund for Lily, ensuring her future was protected. I used the rest to pay off the remaining balance of my own mortgage. Lily thrived in the peace of our new life. She started sleeping soundly through the night. Her teacher actually pulled me aside after school one afternoon to tell me how much more confident, outgoing, and happy she had become in class. Watching her run across the playground, laughing genuinely with her friends, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. I didn't just protect my daughter from a bad Christmas. I protected her from becoming a version of me. I saved her from spending 30 years of her life trying to earn love from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. I broke a generational cycle of abuse, and I built a fortress of peace around my child. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I know it was a long and heavy one, but it's a journey I felt I had to share. I hope this resonated with you in some way, especially if you've ever found yourself exhausted by trying to please people who only value their own image over your well-being. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, dealing with toxic family members who constantly manipulate the truth? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one of them, and your stories remind me that I'm not alone. Before you go, I have a very special request. If you are hearing this sentence right now, you are part of an exclusive group. You are officially part of the 1% Club. I want you to go down to the comments right now and just type the letter W. W stands for winner. It's our secret code so I can instantly recognize the amazing, resilient people who stayed with me to the very end of this video. You guys are the real winners in life, and your continued support means the absolute world to me. Please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so we can keep sharing these incredible stories together. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay strong, and remember to always protect your peace.